I used to sit on the train. I lived in a couple different places, but I'd sit on the train or the bus, my hour commute, and I would just search for properties. Every morning, every afternoon, it was kind of an obsessive thing, right?
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast, Passive Investing Edition. My name's Randy Smith, and I'm your host today, and we have a fantastic guest with us today, Sean Graham. Sean, welcome to the show.
Randy, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Outstanding. I think we're in for a good episode for sure. So,
no
Sean,
pressure, right?
No pressure at all. You just be marvelous, right? Well, yeah. So why don't we go ahead and just kick it off? Can you give us a little bit about your background, talk about what you've done in the past and how you've arrived to where you are here today?
Yeah. So my background is in finance and accounting. I'm a licensed CPA in the state of Michigan, and I was in public accounting. Then I was over in the private equity world. I was working as more or less a controller for a private equity backed company. Slowly started building up real estate on the side. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I knew I wanted to get into some passive investing and some real estate, and so I started house hacking. Eventually, the portfolio built up well enough, and now I'm full-time in self-storage.
Fantastic. Okay, so CPA, so you're a numbers guy.
I am. Yes, very much.
And, that's not an easy path to get to the CPA route. So it's interesting that you chose to go through school, get your CPA, work in that space, and then maybe not set it to the side, but step away from that professional or that profession anyway. So I'm curious, what kind of drove you down that path?
Yeah, I've always been interested in investing. I was always interested, as a kid, in the stock market, but I didn't really understand it. And as I got older, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? But to me, it's like finance and accounting is the language of business. And so in order to be the best entrepreneur I could be, I wanted to go out and master that language. So accounting was really the route to go. So I wouldn't say, I'm not passionate about public accounting. That wasn't ever my dream job or anything like that. But I went through it. It was very tough. I persevered and got through the courses, did my bachelor's and master's in accounting, and then got through my CPA exams and got licensed. But it's been a really good background and good path for me. I kind of started out working on small businesses within tax, and I learned a lot. You really learn to look and read financial statements, and that's helped me, as I grow and started my own company.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, was the goal when you first started to be an entrepreneur, or was the goal to get into public accounting?
The goal was to be an entrepreneur.
It was.
So I wanted to get experience though. My parents, right, they always told me hey, go get something no one could take from you, then go do whatever you want. And to me, they kind of lined up. It's all right, so public or accounting, if I get my CPA license, it's I'm always employable, but also teaches me a lot. And then I can go out, do what I want. Hey, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back. You can go and you can find a job within accounting. So luckily, knock on wood, so far, things have worked out, and I don't see myself turning back or going into public accounting at all. But the background has been great for me. It's just being able to read financial statements, but also when I was in private equity, a lot of it was forecasting and projecting financial statements, right? I was working for a small private equity backed company, right? But I would do all the financial statements, the financial packages, and projecting and pro formas for that company. And that taught me a lot. So now that I've moved over into self-storage, which is a
Mhm.
much simpler business model, uh,
Mhm.
it's taught me a lot. It's been great, and it helps me with um, syndications and raising money, and really just knowing where we're going, putting together packages to get bank loans, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I've seen working in financial services for years, I see the accountants, the CPAs, the controllers that are somewhat sitting on the sidelines. They're actually helping to direct the business, but more often than not, they're not the decision makers. Um, and
Right.
it's interesting that you chose, though, or made that decision to jump over, because so many just sit on the sidelines and they'll sit there and think that. They see how the business is working. They have a lot of ideas and suggestions for it, but more often than not, they stay in the W-2. So I'm curious about that transition, and I'm always intrigued by that moment when you make the decision that I'm going to make the leap from the W-2 over to entrepreneurship. Talk about that, because I suspect a lot of our listeners are curious about that process, or have been dreaming about that moment, or having nightmares. Who knows? So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that decision was made for me, actually.
It was
I got
okay.
fired from my job. Yep, that's what
Okay.
happened. So, I was building up real estate on the side, and I was really waiting for our company to exit. And I knew, as soon as we exited, like that's what I was going to do. I was going to jump over, go full time into commercial real estate. The pandemic hit, a lot of things changed within the company, and basically it extended the timeline,
Got it.
pretty much doubled the original length of time for that exit. So, I think I was really, I was ready to get out, and I think, I wasn't showing the passion and what
Yep.
they needed for that role at that time. And I really think life was calling me in a different direction. This is what I
Mhm.
was doing on the side, and this is what I wanted to do. And so they decided to go in a different direction. They had a pivot with the company because of the pandemic, because they weren't exiting, and they needed somebody who was who really had different experience than I did.
Sure.
Um, so I got fired from my job, and I said, you know what, like that's all right. I'm
Now's
going to
the
make the
time.
most of it. Yeah, it's an opportunity. It's all how you look at it.
Yep.
It's never a fun experience losing your job. It's humbling,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it's an opportunity for me to go do what I wanted to do. So uh,
Okay.
I'm happy to be here and don't have any regrets there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, of course, everything happens for a reason. And, I want to talk, if we can, because I suspect there's a portion of our listener base that is in a similar position where they've lost the passion. I've always said, like, and everybody is selling, but if you're selling something that you don't believe in, it becomes the hardest thing in the world to do. If you're selling something you're
Right.
passionate about, and it's probably the same thing in your background. If you're doing books for something you're passionate about, it's super easy and exciting and you get all geeked out about it. But if it's just pushing numbers and crunching numbers just to do that, you probably lose your passion. So I'm curious, where you probably didn't just read the little purple book and then you wake up one day and you have all the confidence in the world to, go out on your own. There's probably some period of time there where you're learning things, you're getting experiences, you're building confidence that you can actually take the leap. Let's dig into that a little bit. What did your process look like in the education process?
Yeah, I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad back in 2017, right? And
Okay.
that really spoke to me. And it's not exactly a real estate book, but real estate is clearly a path that you can take if you want to start building financial freedom and passive wealth. So from there, I just started educating myself. That's when I discovered Bigger Pockets. I just started reading books. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and the easiest transition for me was the house hacking method.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was in Chicago at the time, and basically I built up a small portfolio of doors and rental units by house hacking. I'd go buy a 3-unit building, I'd live in it, fix it up, bring rates up to market rates, and then go ahead, refinance or sell, and then go and do the next one. So I did
Okay.
that a few times, and that's how I got started.
And so you said very casually, oh, I'd go buy a triplex, I'd fix it up, I'd raise the rents, I'd do this like literally 30 seconds, which covered probably 1,000 lessons and sleepless nights and endless runs to Home Depot. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
And really the goal, like this podcast is geared towards the passive investor, but it seems like a lot of people go through that active stage on the front end. So yeah, can you give us a taste of what that looked like on the front end?
Right, right. And to your point there, a lot of it comes down to where you're personally at in your career and what you're an expert at and what you want to do. For a lot of people, I wasn't a high income W-2 earner.
Okay.
This is how I was going to build wealth. And for a lot of passive investors, it's different. They have great jobs. They're in great W-2 positions. Going and house hacking a building is not the best route for them. They're better off continuing to do what they do and
Yeah.
invest with other people. But that being said, yeah, I used to sit on the train. I lived in a couple different places, but I'd sit on the train or the bus on my hour commute, and I would just search for properties
Mhm.
every morning, every afternoon. Like it was kind of an obsessive thing, right? And you have to be, because as soon as it hits the market, you have to be ready to move. So
Yeah.
I was pre-approved. I had everything in order, and after analyzing lots and lots of properties, what I came to realize was, at least in Chicago, in that market, I was using an FHA loan, right? So I was only putting down 3.5%, but the 1% rule really worked for qualifying for an FHA loan and would get me a property that would cash flow. So if
Okay.
I'm looking at a building that was $500,000, then it needed to bring in at least $5,000 a month in rent. I didn't have to do it
And,
at the time I bought it, but I had to
yeah.
be able to bring it up to that at least.
So I'm curious, in that situation, were you factoring the amount that you would actually be paying as a mortgage into that 1%, or were you just solely looking at the other two sides or the other two doors covering the full cost of that 1% rule?
I knew if I got to the 1%, I was looking at it as if all the units were rented, right? Including the one I was living in.
Okay, fair
Because
enough.
this was a
Fair enough.
long-term investment. It wasn't, yes, I'd go live there for a year, right? But so without me living there, I'd still have to pay, a few $100s a month while I'm living there, I'd have to pay a few $100s a month just to get the mortgage fully covered, including
Yep.
the other rents. But by the time I moved out, that 1% rule allowed me to be cash flowing, over $1,000 a month. And so those started to build up for me. And that's really what allowed me ultimately to be okay when I did
Okay.
lose my job and to just go full time with commercial real estate.
Yeah, I love it. So the work that you did while you were in your W-2 in the real estate space made the firing or the layoff a much gentler landing than had you not done that, it sounds like, right?
It did. Yes, it
Okay.
definitely did. Yep.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. You brought up the fact that you weren't this high earning W-2 guy, but your superpower really was numbers, analysis. Definitely trying to find that needle in the haystack where the numbers work. And in real estate, we talk about highest and best use, and it really kind of ties into this, like, what is your superpower that you can bring to this space that's going to give you the edge over all of the other folks that are doing that. And in your case, you're a numbers guy and you had 2 hours a day that you're sitting on a train. So use that time versus scrolling social media to invest in you and your family's future to provide for a better
Exactly.
life. So
Exactly.
that's amazing. Yeah.
Yep. I had to
Yeah.
get
Very
rid
cool.
of the Instagram on my phone, delete the apps, that sort of thing. Just focus
Okay.
on either listening to podcasts, audiobooks, or searching for properties. That was pretty much it. And if you're passionate
Podcast
about it,
University. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. I was in a similar boat. I was a sales guy and we called it windshield time, where I'm out driving all over, God only knows where, Vegas and Utah and New Mexico, but literally, 2, 3, 4 hours a day. Sometimes all I did was listen to podcasts or books on or Audible, those types of things. And it comes down to that choice. Like, am I going to choose to fill my mind with education and inspiration and insight? Or am I going to try to numb out and listen to whatever talk show or news or whatever that is. So it's exciting to meet and be with guys that have the same passion as I do. So great job.
Agreed, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious. That model is just such a cool model for folks are your position, or anybody wanting to get into real estate. The house hack. Living in Phoenix myself, it would be I feel like it would be a little bit harder for me because the areas that have triplexes and quads and small multis aren't necessarily areas where I would want to live. I'm curious, in Chicago, did you have to potentially live in an area that you might not want to be long term? You did. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the first place I lived was Forest Park, and it was just outside the city limits, right? So it was at the very end of the train. And so I had I was on the blue line, and I had the longest commute every day. That's part of the deal though, right? Like all of my friends, they were living in, like Wicker Park or Lincoln Park, and they were right next to the bars and the restaurants, and it was awesome for them. And I had to make that social sacrifice in order to do what I wanted to do. So that wasn't like a dangerous area, but it was definitely a sacrifice. And then the next building that we bought and lived in, and my wife and I did, was in South Shore, Chicago. And the buildings down there are beautiful. It's a beautiful area, but it's rough. It's not. It's just a rough area. You had to deal with a lot of things that you weren't used to. Just shootings. You'd hear them. It's like that's not something I ever was used to, but it was just kind of a common thing. You start living with a level of stress too that you're not really used to. You don't realize you have that level of stress. It's like just before you go outside, you're kind of going to look and see if everything looks okay before going outside. So, and I still have that building, and I lived there for a year. It was the most beautiful building I had lived in. Each unit was 2,400 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. And I got it for, I don't know, probably $80 a square foot or so, right? Just very, very nice.
Wow.
But I had that sacrifice of the location of where it was at. And I think that area will start to turn around. The Obama Library is going in down there, and it'll change. But it's you kind of have to make some sacrifices. If every building that made sense was in like Lincoln Park or Wicker Park or just a great area of a popular area, then everyone would do it. But you kind of have to figure out what you're willing to sacrifice in order to make it happen.
Yep. And I think at the end of the day, everybody has to make a sacrifice. You're either sacrificing maybe the area that you live and safety, or on the other side of the thing, maybe you're sacrificing your financial future by not putting yourself in those situations. So, the struggle is going to occur. You just got to choose which struggle you're going to have in your life. And it's neat to see that this is paying off for you at this point. So
Good way to put it.
Yeah. And I think, so you mentioned 2 different properties. What did the full portfolio look like by the time you stopped doing that and kind of shifted gears?
I went through, let's say, a total of 4 buildings, which was 10 units. Some were good experiences, some were not. I think one was a pretty bad experience, where actually I did the whole out-of-state investing without being there. And what I learned was, and this goes into everything I do, right? If you buy a poor quality property and a bad quality area, then that's what you're going to get. That's the experience you're going to get. It doesn't matter if on paper it cash flows 2% of the purchase price, right?
Right.
I think I bought something of $70,000. It was in Indianapolis, and I rented it out, and I was supposed to get $1,400 a month, right? So on paper, this thing was great. It's like fantastic. Let's do it. I think in total, I ended up losing about $30,000, getting rid of that property. But the lessons it taught me really were great, and that carries into everything now. I don't. It was self-storage. I want to buy a quality property, and have, a quality experience, give my renters a quality experience. And those are the properties that really will do well.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And, for the newer passive investor, the out of state, long distance landlord can sound very attractive. I was enamored by it. I got pulled into it. I ended up buying a bunch of houses in various states around the country. And I think exactly what you said is true. So just because something's cheap and looks on paper like it's going to cash flow day one,
Right.
does not take into consideration all of those other factors. And there's a lot of, kind of rules of thumb to consider, like save 10% for CapEx, save 10% for turns when people move out and come back in. But there's very rarely that you're going to see an Excel sheet to analyze a deal that says, how do you replace an air conditioner when somebody comes and steals your air conditioner in the middle of the summer? Right?
Right.
Or how do you repair a plumbing line that costs $9,000 that has been, has 50 years of erosion and trees breaking into it? Like, you just can't think about that type of stuff. So I think those are all really good lessons. And it gave you probably some really neat skills about managing resources from afar that you've probably been able to bring into your business today. So I'm curious, what kind of lessons did you learn from that experience that you're leveraging in your current state?
Yeah. Well, I was the landlord. I was managing, and I still am, right, managing those properties. And
Okay.
when you first start doing it, it's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
You're worried about everything, but it's really about getting the right team. Having the right people around you, and a big one of those is just having the correct, handyman or maintenance guy, or guy who can go in and fix things and help you and will be there. That's huge,
Sure.
right? Because
Sure.
I didn't, in the beginning, I did a lot more work, but I always intended, and I quickly transitioned into outsourcing everything, right? Because I didn't want to be in Chicago long term, and I'm not anymore. I'm in Metro Detroit. But I just sold one of my buildings, but I still have the other one in South Shore down there. But I've managed those two buildings for a year and a half and didn't go back one time. Haven't been back
Oh,
there.
okay.
And the way to do it is you have to have the right systems and the right team in place. And also you have to have like quality tenants. Again, it's all
Sure.
about quality. So that was tough. There was a lot of times where I just wanted to just get the thing rented, and I was worried, and I held out and waited for the right person, and that paid off. In Chicago, like, you could really get away without paying your rent during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You could go and not pay the rent, and there really wasn't much of a way where I was going to be able to evict you or anything like that. But again, I had quality tenants with good credit scores and good jobs, and I didn't miss any rents there.
That's awesome.
So that has taught me a lot, and it's made managing self storage is honestly so much easier because
Sure.
you have the systems in place. No one's living there.
Right.
You have to worry about like broken pipes in the bathroom or the kitchen. There's rarely an emergency. So managing self storage is much, much simpler than managing, I think, rental properties and
Okay. When
multifamily.
I think that's probably a good transition point for us. So let's talk about that. You clearly have shifted over into self storage. There's a lot of benefits to self storage, but how did you get into that space, and what kind of drove you in that direction?
Yeah. So the way I went about building my rental portfolios, I was using low down payment loans, and I was to be able to get in and buy the 3-unit building. So when I went to self storage, I was looking for when I wanted to go into commercial real estate. And I was looking for a way to enter commercial real estate, right? Knowing that I had limited capital to put down as like a huge down payment.
Mm-hmm.
So the cool thing about self storage is it qualifies for SBA loans. You could do like an SBA 7A or SBA 504 loan, and those can be like they'll give you 85% leverage on those, right? And
Okay.
the reason it qualifies is because the SBA looks at it as a business. So it has the benefits of both being a business and being real estate. Like SBA won't give you a loan to go buy a multifamily apartment complex, but they will to buy give you a loan to buy a self-storage facility. So
Interesting.
that's the route I went. And so the first two properties I purchased, I used an SBA loan, and it's gone from there.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. I was not aware of that. And that certainly makes that more attractive from the operator standpoint.
Right.
I'm curious, as primarily a passive investor, what does that type of leverage do to the returns or the potential returns for your passive investors? Because generally, the more you finance, the more it costs, potentially the less cash flow. So I'm curious how that pencils out.
The properties that I purchased using SBA loans, I just did private partnerships. So I didn't do syndications. So it'd be me and two other people would each purchase one, and we use an SBA loan. And that was really to get into the business, get experience, learn how to manage them, figure things out, and build a track record. So since we've done that, then we've moved over into syndications, and those are a lot, the leverage is a lot lower. You're talking more 75%, let's say.
They are. Okay. And you're not leveraging SBA loans anymore with these syndications?
Not with the syndications. With the syndications, no. Don't leverage SBA loans with the syndications. We typically go with a local bank or a local credit union who knows the area, knows the space, and is willing to do it.
Okay. Well, let's dig into self-storage more. Our listeners, I'm sure, are very interested to hear. Can you walk us through some of the concerns that are coming up today as we're potentially in a recession, whether we are or we're not, depends on which headline you're reading. But how does self-storage do in recessionary periods versus growth periods?
Historically, it's done very well. So it has been very resilient through recessions. It did very well in 2008, 2009. It also did very well during the pandemic. I think the overall, it's a game of supply and demand. Mm-hmm. So demand has just continued to increase. So you don't want to go into an area where it's oversupplied, right? And there's just not enough demand to fill it up. That doesn't make sense. But if you can find the right property and it really proves that, hey, the demand is still there, or there is demand for more, then that's a good opportunity. I like to look for those properties that they're 100% full, right? Which the owners are very happy and they're like, yeah, I'm 100% full. This is great. And it's like, okay, cool. Like that's a property I want to buy because you probably haven't found the true market rates. And we come in, we buy and really try to find that equilibrium of supply and demand where it's like, all right, you push rents up and you don't want to be 100% full. You want to start seeing like what the market is willing to pay for. And like, I'd rather be 70, 80% full making, let's say $15,000 a month in revenue than be 100% full making, $10,000, $11,000 a month in revenue.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah. So, and I'm curious, do you just look at, is it occupancy? Is that what that's called? Or do you call it something else in the self-storage space or?
No, occupancy.
Okay. So is the occupancy just one of many metrics that you're looking at, or do you do any analysis on like number of available storage units per population? Something. Yes. It seems like there could be some calculation there. What does that look like?
For sure. So we look at you can look at it two ways. You can look at the circular radius. So we'll do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mile radius. Look at the population, and then we actually go and typically use Google Maps, right? and measure the buildings of all the competing self-storage facilities, and we get an estimate, right?
Like square footage
Square
estimate,
footage.
or
What is the square footage of space
okay,
available, self-storage space, right?
okay.
And that's how we figure out like what is the square feet per capita. Um,
And so you and your team are literally looking at a Google map and saying that looks like a storage building, and doing some analysis for that specific building, how many square feet that is.
Yep, we do a lot of hands-on analysis. We get in.
Wow.
There's tools for this, right? Like there's something
Sure.
called Radius Plus, and it'll do it for you. But it doesn't it doesn't necessarily capture everything. So it's a good
Sure.
starting point. But you really want to go in there and make sure that the self storage facility down the street that has no website, isn't on Google,
Yeah.
doesn't have a Google My Business profile, is being captured. So
Yeah.
my team literally goes in and measures on Google Maps the length and width of each building. We kind of estimate, like, if it's an indoor facility, estimate, okay, what's the hallway space that's going to be taken up. But we try to get as close as we can to a square footage per person within each of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mile radius. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I would never in a million years think to do that myself. So I think that just talks to the necessity of partnering with a guy like you and your team that has that type of know-how to do something like that. Because yeah, making a bad decision on an investment property is actually worse than making no decision at all when it comes to investing. So.
right, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so occupancy. You talked a little bit about like the fee structures, and it's almost becomes like a management of like a management of occupancy based on the rates. Like you want to keep pushing the rates to make sure that you're not too full, but you don't want to push it so much that you drop down to 40 or 50%. So I'm curious, quality of service, I would imagine, plays into that as well. So what differentiates a good storage unit from a bad storage unit from a user perspective? Is it just painted pretty and bright lights and good traffic, or like what are people looking for in a self-storage unit?
Yeah, I like to look at the quality in terms of, okay, is it, can we fence it in? If it's not fenced in, do we have security cameras? Do we have the right software in place with an automated gate, right? So tenant can come in, they can go on the website, rent a unit, and they're going to get their gate code automatically. Is it, for just a management standpoint, from a management standpoint, will they be locked out, right? If they don't pay their rent and they're late, and all these
Mm-hmm.
little things, that it's just technology and software and tools that allow you to manage the facilities remotely make a huge difference. The more secure your facility is, the more well lit it is, then the less likely you're going to, have an issue with theft, or your place getting trashed. Now, those things still happen. You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
avoid everything, but it lowers the risk a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the time here. We're already at 30 minutes, and I feel like we could go for another half hour to an hour just talking more details about this. So why don't we, if we can you tell us a little bit about your company and what it is that you guys offer to investors if they
Sure.
wanted to connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So my company's Maven Equities, and we invest in self storage. And so we are a self storage investment and syndicator. So we do syndications. We find properties that we can buy, add value to, and then get our investors a great return. So if you have any interest in those, or you want to check out our website, you can go to mavenequities.com and you can see our current offerings. But other than that, it's just, if you're a seller, right? If you have self storage and you're interested in selling, I'm always love to connect with owners and anybody who has questions too. I'm happy to just talk to and connect with them. Pretty much an open book when it comes to this stuff.
Okay. Yeah, no, you've been great. Uh, you and I, obviously, we met each other a handful of months ago through a coaching community we're a part of. And it's been really neat to see the progression just in the little amount of time that we've known each other. But it looks like you are growing quickly. You seem like a very high integrity stand up guy, and you surround yourself with those folks as well. So it's been really neat to see your progress and see your growth. And I'm sure that'll continue for years and years to come. So
Thank
congratulations.
you. I appreciate that. And hopefully we'll be doing deals together here soon as well.
I think there could be a chance that could occur. Yes, definitely. Um, well, let's do this. I've got a handful of questions I like to ask pretty quickly at the end, just to kind of round this thing out and round you out a little bit. You mentioned Bigger Pockets and the Little Purple Book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. But any other podcasts or books that you'd like to share with the new passive investor or somebody who's just getting into this space to hopefully ignite the fire like it was in you?
Uh, if you're talking just like specifically self storage, I think the go-to book would be AJ Osborne's book. He has a podcast as well. It's called the Self Storage Income Podcast, but that's just a great educational resource. It's more geared to, I think, people who are interested in becoming self storage owner operators themselves, but
Okay.
it's a great way for passive investors to go ahead and get educated on the space as well.
Okay. Well, let me ask it this way. If you're stuck on a train in Chicago for an hour going down to one of your properties, what's first on your podcast list?
I used to listen to a lot of Bigger Pockets, right? I listened to it, but
Yeah.
at a certain point, it becomes more of a distraction than
Yeah.
anything. And so once you kind of find your space that you want to go into, then that's more of a distraction. I'd rather just focus on my space and go into that. But I'll share a book that I have been listening to lately, and I have to give credit to my partner who mentioned it, Fernando. We're doing a syndication together, but it's called "They Ask You Answer" by Marcus Sheridan. It's a great book, and it's really about providing value to others, answering the questions that other people don't want to, and it really comes from an abundance mentality, which is one of my core values at Maven Equities. And
Sure.
really, the more you share, the more you help others, the more comes back to you, and you attract business that way. So
I love
uh,
it.
it's a great book.
That will be going on my list. Any book you suggest, I would actually throw on there. So, okay, what about this one? Is there a recent bucket list item you have checked off of your list?
My wife and I went to Banff, Canada, and we went to Lake
Oh,
Louise over the summer. So that was huge. That was we I loved it. It's just beautiful. You have the big blue lakes. There's plenty of other ones too, up in the mountains, and there's snow in the mountains in July, and you can hike, and you see lots of wild animals, and it was really really cool. So we went there for about a week and just got away, but that was a bucket list item.
very nice. Very nice. Yeah, it's funny. My wife and I have gone to Europe for our last two big trips, and there's still so many places here, even in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, that we haven't even experienced. I need to just stay home or stay
Right,
close to see my world that's close to me. Interesting.
right.
What about a future bucket list item? Are you shooting for anything at this point?
Yeah, no, my wife and I just had our first baby a
Ah,
month ago today in October,
okay.
right? So we have our hands tied. We're going through the many sleepless nights and just figuring that all out, firsthand. So
Yeah.
that was the big trip we wanted to take before the baby was due, and now that he's here, we're just focused on that. But there'll
Yeah.
be a trip sooner.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, there'll be a trip sooner or later. It's just haven't mentally. This is just where I'm at and what I'm focusing on. So,
Yeah. Bucket list today is 8 hours of sleep somehow, right?
oh yeah, that'd be amazing. I never realized like how well you can function on just very little to no sleep. The
Yeah.
biggest struggle is when the sun's down, the sun, or when it's dark out, it's just, it's rough. But as soon as the sun comes up, you're like, all right, ready to go, few
That's
hours,
awesome.
2 or 3 hours of sleep. That's all right. Let's go.
And just think it's preparing you for years and years to come of little, if any, sleep through kids and the business and all of the things that life gives you. So that's awesome, though. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So you already mentioned the company, but how could our listeners connect to you directly? Is it email? Is it a website? How can we best find you?
Yeah, my email is sean@mavenequities.com. I don't know if I can give you my social media links and stuff as well. You can.
We'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. I have all my social media links, but if you're interested in investing, you can go to mavenequities.com, and there's a become an investor on mavenstorage.com. That's where we market to self-storage owners who are looking to possibly sell and want to avoid brokerage fees. But I'm on Instagram. It's all through Maven Equities, but Instagram, Twitter, all the social media links.
TikTok soon too, right?
TikTok, we got on TikTok too. So
there's some pictures of you guys dancing in front of storage units, or
not yet. I don't think I'm going to be a TikTok king anytime soon.
Okay.
Yeah, I try to avoid the distracting, addicting social media platforms. So TikTok is like I post stuff on there, but I'm not as engaged in TikTok.
Fair enough. Well, hey, it's been super fun. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I think you brought a ton of value to the group. So Sean, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I appreciate it. It's been great getting to know you, and thank you for having me on here.
Awesome. Well, listeners, what I'll say is, as always, this is just another example of just an amazing operator in the space. It comes down to the operator in any investment that you choose. So bet on the jockey. You can tell that Sean's a very high integrity guy, hard worker, is going to put good investments in front of his investors. So definitely reach out to Sean, follow him. Get on his calendar if you have any other questions. And again, overall, just continue that education path. Find something that gets you excited, find something that gets you passionate, and get the education and inspiration to make that first investment. Because once you do, I promise you'll never go back to traditional investing. So thanks so much, everybody, for listening today, and we'll look forward to our next episode.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.